Ever feel like your landscape photos are missing something, that are not quite capturing the true beauty of the landscape in front of you? Well, you're not alone. In this video, I'm going to ditch the basic tips related to landscape photography, and I'm going to share with you some advanced landscape photography tips and techniques that are based on my own personal experience. And I can guarantee 101% that your photos will transform if you're going to apply these tips. Now, this video is designed for photographers who have the fundamentals and basics of photography well established, and they want to elevate their photography skill. Let's get going with the first tip that I have for you, and that is related to advanced composition techniques. When we're talking about composition, we talk about a certain set of rules that we apply in order to have a much more dynamic and interesting perspective on the landscape. Now, you may be wondering, what are those advanced composition techniques? Basically, are the same composition techniques, but with a twist. Let's talk about depth in layers. Take a look at this photo. What you're seeing is a foreground element that is really, really dark. And because of that, you have a good sensation and feeling that what is happening in the background is the background. And that happens really far away. And you have a sense of depth. Again, another photo where I used a really powerful foreground element and then a middle element in those rocks. And then you have those really beautiful sun rays right there in the background. And because that is the most brightened area of the photo, your attention and the viewer's attention will move towards that area. Another photo where I'm sitting really low and I'm creating a really powerful diagonal really close to the camera. Now, the reason of which this photo works, it's because I have that light in the middle ground. I have a little bit of darkness or shadow in the upper part of the photo, and the reason for that is to capture the attention of the viewer between these two areas of shadow. Another photo is this one where you really have a dramatic and impressive representation of nature. You have this really impressive mountain in the foreground, and if you look closely on top of that mountain, you're going to see a small cross. And whenever you're going to have an element that it's created by humans, or you have a human silhouette in the shot, you know automatically how big the landscape is because you have information and you have something to compare with. Now let's talk about leading lines and why having powerful leading lines can lead to impressive landscapes. Take a look at this photo, for example, and you're going to see multiple corners of the leading line that help you to navigate through the photo. It's a much more powerful representation of the landscape because I included all sorts of elements here. For example, that big rock on the right, it's a stop element. This is what I'm calling elements that help the viewer's attention move away from those elements and concentrate to the subject of the photo. And for example, this one here, it's a famous property in Tuscany. We're doing the sunrise over there every time we go there, and you're going to see that the photo is starting in the lower left side of the image. We have the cypress trees, we have the road, and then that road leads to the property that is in the upper right corner. You have all these lines that control the attention of the viewer, and you have a very clear path through the photo. This one also, it's a famous property in Tuscany, and I included those flowers in the foreground as elements that hide things that I don't want to see. For example, other photographers, or they have a really small pond that doesn't look that well over here. And also because I wanted to have a really dynamic perspective, the road starts to my right and goes to the left and then goes back to the right. I think this is a very powerful way to represent this. And you have a beautiful evolution of the curve inside the photo. Negative space, it's also something that you can elevate, and if you want to have your compositions move to basic composition to something much more interesting, learn to recognize negative space, because negative space is not only pure color, like pure white, for example, or pure blue of the sky. You can also have similar elements, and you have one element that really stands out, like in this case, this is a large tree. The photo is shot in late October, and I'm having these misty pine trees, misty mountains that are surrounding this really beautiful yellow tree that really stands out. Again, a field, and all the elements that are different from that one single tree have a similar color. So you can treat them as negative space. So next time you're going to see elements that are really close together, and then you have one element that really pops out, you can treat all the other elements as negative space. For example, this photo is a sunset in the Dolomites, which I was really lucky to capture it. I call it the miracle, this photo. I think it's truly a representation of luck. And this other image where I'm having a really small cypress tree in the middle of those fields with all that morning fog. I think it's a really simple yet powerful representation. Let's talk about tip number 2, or technique number 2, which is related to lens filters, and we're going to go beyond the polarizer. Let me ask you something, and you can comment below. Do you have, or do you use filters in your landscape photography? Because more and more I encounter photographers during my workshops that don't use filters. They say, I'm going to photograph it and I'm going to do multiple exposures, and I'm going to fix all this in, or blend all this in Photoshop. Well, I personally have the whole bag of filters. And when I'm talking about filters, yes, a polarizer is a must-have, but you can go above that. And I'm gonna share with you some photos and talk about the filters that I'm using and the system that I'm using, because I think using filters is a really huge part of the joy of really crafting your photo right there when you're sitting in the landscape. So first, let's talk about ND filters, because for me these are magical filters, and they get me out of really boring situations, like for example in this case when the blue sky had no clouds on it, and the only way I could make something interesting was with a ND filter. Now I have the square format, and I have 3 stops, 6, 10 and 15 stops, and inside the holder I can also fit a 105 millimeter circular polarizer. So I'm using that, even though it's a big kit to carry around. I think it makes me much happier. It makes me happier when I'm photographing using filters, because I feel like I'm creating something, and I'm really doing something that is different. Again, that foam that you get on the ground, so you can use ND filters to, I'm pretty sure you know, to capture the evolution of the landscape in a period of time. And I think this is a unique perspective on the landscape. You can't see it or perceive it with your own eye as a human being, and I think this is a unique way to interpret it. And as you can see, these photos are really serene and calm, and you can get some really interesting photos. Now, the second type of filter that I really like and I use are ND gradiated filters. And I use 2 ND gradiated filters. They are both soft and both 3 stops. But one is normal ND gradiated filter of 3 stops, and the other one is reversible and has all the gradient concentrated in the middle of the filter. And that is very useful for sunrises or sunsets, like you see in this photo where I placed the gradient right on the horizon line, and then I can also compensate with the 3 stops on the top part, and I'm having a good exposure right from the start, even in really difficult situations, like for example this photo over here. In this situation I only use a 3D stops and the gradient filter to the top area, because I wanted to encapsulate that area of light between 2 areas of shadow. Again, I use the reversible 3 stops. Here the normal one, because I wanted to accentuate the powerful and dramatic clouds that you can see above. I mean, this was a really spectacular storm in Tuscany that we had a chance to photograph. And of course this one over here, where whenever you have reflections, the reflection is 2 to 3 stops darker than the actual object or element that is being reflected. So you have to use a 3 stops and the gradient filter to compensate for the 2 areas. Tip number 3, embrace the imperfection, weather and mood. Good weather, good sunny weather, it's only for tourists. If you want your photos to really pop out, learn to photograph in moody and dramatic weather. Bad weather makes good photos. Rainy days, foggy days, cloudy days, dark cloudy days before and after a storm. All these are really powerful moments when your photography will look better than all the other photos. So this is a normal day in the Dolomites, and you have those mists that are rising from the mountain after rain or storm. Again, this is another moment, and I use an ND filter in the top, an integrated filter in the top, and I captured those moments right after the storm ended. This also was truly spectacular. This is the second time that I captured a moment like this. I was at Trecime di Lavaredo in the Dolomites. We were photographing the sunset, and there was rainy clouds coming from the left side, from Missourina. And these 3 peaks literally stopped those clouds. And after that, the clouds moved beyond the peaks, and you have this really dramatic and almost like a miracle happening. And this dramatic sunrise, when we arrived, there was fog everywhere. So I stayed because I looked on the forecast, on the weather forecast, and there were few clouds in the sky. Whenever you have few clouds in the sky and there is fog, you're going to for sure had the fog dissipated at a certain point because of the warmth of the sun. So we stayed there, we waited, and just when the Cinque Torri, or the 5 towers, emerged from the fog, we photographed it. And of course, in foggy days, I like to go and photograph inside forests because they look absolutely spectacular. As you can see in this photo over here, where the attention of the viewer is drawn on the trail and goes in the distance, in the background, or in this location when I placed myself in an area of shadow and darkness and I photographed towards light, and your attention will go towards that light. Or this one over here, again, I'm using the trunk of the trees to encapsulate your attention towards that area of light. I think it works every time. Tip number 4 is related to scouting, locations, and planning. You can't leave anything to luck. If you're going to visit a location for the first time, it's important to plan. I use mainly Google Earth to look around and evaluate how the landscape look. Why you're going to look for photos from a certain location before you're going there. I personally don't like to be influenced, but it's a good thing to know what it's already been done. I want to stand out as a landscape photographer, and in my personal opinion, the only way to stand out is to do different photos in those locations that people are doing the same photo over and over again, year after year after year. And you need to know what it's been done. Now, you can get to a place where people are photographing, do the photo that everybody else is doing, and then scout the place. Look for different perspectives, look for different compositions, look for different elements, present the location in a way that is completely different. And tip number 5, which is, in my personal opinion, the most important one in this gathering of tips, is the one related to light. So learn to master light and shadow. I think light is the most powerful element, and as a landscape photographer, you can't control the light, but you can control what you frame, what you include in your photos, what you don't include in your photos, and when you decide to take the shot. And with this in mind, you have to understand that the attention of the viewer will always be concentrated into the light. In my personal opinion, we have two big groups of photos: the photos that are done in a really spectacular light, and the photos that are done in normal, boring light. Let me show you some photos that are perfect simply because the light was perfect. So perfect light looks like this. You have a mountain, you have mists rising from the mountain, and you have the morning light glowing in those mists. Or you have blue hour, which is really eerie, which is really dark, it's really moody, it's haunting, it's something that looks different. You have fog that is lighting up by the sunrise, and you're having this really unique moment. Or you have side light coming from the sunrise that is really highlighting the shape and the silhouettes of the pine trees that are covered by snow. Or you have this image and you have the light simply flooding the landscape. This also is one of those moments when light was perfect. And the only thing I had to do was to be there. That is one really huge condition. Be there when the light is beautiful. Not that easy to do in certain areas. Here I had a really powerful moment. I had light only on those pine trees and then fog in the forest and fog on the surface of the lake. What can I say? Magic. And this last moment of pure magic when the clouds opened and the light entered, and again, it's like a miracle. It's like witnessing a miracle. But there is also midday light. And in certain situations, that midday light will look absolutely gorgeous, spectacular, and dramatic, like you can see in this photo, which is the midday light after a storm. Or this one over here, which is midday light, but there were clouds, and I had a separation in the clouds, and then a beam of light when they're on the mountain. Or this classic view where you have beautiful clouds in the sky and you have a beautiful representation of a mountain peak or some sort of element in the landscape. This one, again, simple clouds, normal light, big and huge contrast, perfect for black and white. I forgot to tell you that my name is Toma, and I'm a full-time landscape photographer since 2009. And if you want to learn more about landscape photography, I have an ebook and some courses on my website. The link is in the description of this video. And if you want to join me to one of my photo tours, also you can do that from my website. And until next time, keep on photographing, because it's the only way that you can get better. Bye-bye.